Makes sense.
Welcome back, audience. LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, wherever you're watching this live feed of our Human-Centered AI Masters webinar series. I welcome you back in 2022. It's going to be a dramatic year in terms of how we move away, hopefully, from COVID and start rebuilding the economies around the world. And teaching the world on AI continues to remain something which we definitely have been working super hard in the background. Just giving you guys a background on what Human-Centered AI Masters program is. It is a European Union funded program where we have 4 universities and a few subject matter expert industries and research centers. And introducing you to one of our project partners is CeADAR. It's an AI research lab in Ireland. And I'll just jump straight into the introduction so you get to know these wonderful gentlemen who are sitting here with me. These are our colleagues, and we are working super hard to actually build this AI master's program for you guys so you can enroll on this master's program starting September this year. Without much ado, I'm going to jump to our introductions. I'll start with Dr. Oshin Boydell, and then I have Inder Preet and Dr. Ali Reza. These are 3 wonderful sort of gentlemen who have deep technical expertise in their own individual areas. But starting with Oshin, please tell us a little bit about yourself, Oshin.
Thanks, Harry. I'm Oshin Boydell, and I am Principal Data Scientist at CeADAR. So CeADAR is Ireland's National Centre for Applied AI. And at CeADAR, I lead the Applied Research Group here. And we work on various applied research projects and applied AI and machine learning projects across a whole broad spectrum, I suppose, of different types of technologies that all fall under the AI umbrella. So machine learning, AI, we do some blockchain related work as well, a lot of explainable machine learning, privacy preserving aspects of that, more and more as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Oshin. Inder, what do you do at CeADAR?
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Hi, everyone. That's Inder here, and I'm a data scientist at CeADAR in the Applied Research Group. And I've worked on a variety of projects, and more recently, I've been working on privacy preserving machine learning, PPML, which is one of the topics that we're going to discuss today. Apart from that, I've worked on various different projects like XAI, Earth observation, etc. So yeah,
awesome.
That's
so the mix of IoT and edge and obviously working with satellite data. Awesome. Ali Reza, a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks, Terry, for inviting us to this call. Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Reza Deghani. I'm Senior Research Fellow at CeADAR at the moment. But before that, I used to come from high-tech industry, working in startups and corporates on embedded systems, vision-based embedded system mostly. So after 10 plus years of high-tech and academia experience in CeADAR at CeADAR at the moment, we are doing a lot of interesting projects around AI, machine learning, and so on, like Oshin mentioned.
Great. So before we jump into technical topics, I thought that, since you guys are all going to be following your, hopefully, following at the universities in Ireland, in Netherlands, in Italy, and in Hungary. So it is really a quadrilateral kind of a project where all European nations from, different parts of Europe have, come together to build this AI Masters for you guys. Maybe Ali Reza, could you kind of give a bit of a perspective? I know we're going to get into the details, the technical details, and I'm sure you're super excited to learn about privacy preserving machine learning and explainable AI, and Inder and Oshin will talk about that. But Ali Reza, so how do these? I know these are techniques, very exciting. How do they fit it into this the young generation who are learning about machine learning? Because right now everybody's learning about machine learning. They all jump into the data sets, they dive into it, and they say, I'm solving a problem, I'm creating a nice interface, and let me sell it to the industry. And security and privacy is afterthought. Who cares? I mean, let's just build it, right? So how is it going to help help us teach young people these new emerging technologies?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. So all of us, machine learning nowadays is a very essential part of the businesses. So there are a lot of data, so they want to use this data to create solutions to help people and solve problems of real people. But at the same time, it's not only building the things, so that's the ethic part of the thing is really important. It is very important to, protect the privacy of the people, the data, etc. So usually the young generation, they are concerned about how to train a network, a model to do some things, but they don't think about how to protect that network, that model, because easily it is possible to do the inversion or spoofing, things like that, and extract the data that has been used for training that network, or even making the network and system make wrong decision in the favor of the people, the attacker. So it is really important nowadays. Big companies like Inder will talk about them during the live. So lots of the big companies and even startups, they are working on that aspect now, and it is very important for young generation who wants to step into this field to take care of what these ideas, things like cryptography, things like multi-party computations, things like adversarial attacks, etc. So these are all of these things we will talk about in this slide are really important topics that young generation who wants to be in this field, they need to take into account.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not some kind of a charitable enterprise that, okay, oh, come on, please learn privacy and security. I know that, we're going to get into PPML, and perhaps you can give a little bit high level. I know, it's a webinar. We have like max 45 minutes, so we won't go into the nitty gritty, but perhaps a high level explanation about what is privacy preserving in machine learning. It's a combination of a bunch of topics. I work myself on differential privacy, for instance. So these are very interesting topics, but they end up becoming big, fat Springer books where one or bunch of subject matter experts write these books, and then it never reaches the software industry, never reaches enterprises. So could you explain a high level, what is privacy preserving machine learning? What are the techniques that are being adopted by industries as well? So we are encouraged that it's not just something we want the students to learn, it's something they should learn.
Sure. Well, I think to answer that, I'll just pick up from where Ali Reza left, because it sort of ties in, the motivation of PPML ties in with what it is. And there has always been a moral responsibility, to protect the privacy of the subjects whose data was collected. But on top of that, now we see regulations which sort of enforce these responsibilities. All of us have heard about GDPR, and there are several other regulations, especially concerning medical data, which sort of make it legally necessary to protect privacy. And as such, this field of privacy preserving machine learning has come up because machine learning, to be honest, has been one of the great factors which has contributed to more data collection and keeping the data for a long period of time and sort of monetize data in many different ways. So that's what PPML refers to. It refers to a collection of techniques that can be used to enhance privacy. So, and there are two aspects of it. One is enhancing privacy of the data itself, and then enhancing privacy of the models or the algorithms trained on that data. So PPML is sort of that umbrella term which consists of all these techniques. So like you mentioned, differential privacy is one of them. Homomorphic encryption is one of them. Secure multi-party computation is one of them. So there are many techniques like this, and it's been evolving. And it's good to see that many companies are actually adopting it. And there has come a stage where the research into this field is actually being adopted by many of these companies. For example, you mentioned differential privacy. Apple, back in I think 2016 or 2017, has implemented differential privacy in most of their products. So whenever you're doing something on Apple products, it is somewhat protected, but there are other things also around it. People have questioned it or not. So we have already seen that many of these PPML techniques, which were discussed only in research circles, are actually being adopted by companies. And we as a center, or as an industrial research center, also have many member companies which are working towards marketing these or selling these PPML techniques to other companies.
Cool. So I think we'll go into a bit of detail in the next few questions. Perhaps a use case example would be very good to give the audience. Let's also go into, again, another umbrella term which has been used by many folks to create interesting narratives on internet. But when it comes down to building something in explainability and interpretability about AI, there's been probably more work done in terms of creating it, on trying to see if they can open up a model, a machine learning model, and show people what's inside. Oshin, explainable AI, can you give a high-level sort of explanation from your perspective as to how does it fit into a curriculum any student should be learning?
Yeah, so explainable AI and explainability really of machine learning models is another one of these sort of really important areas that I suppose, like Inder was mentioning with PPML, might a number of years ago maybe was sort of more restricted to the kind of research publications and so on. But with the kind of increasing awareness of human-centered AI approaches has really sort of come much more to the fore recently, and there's a huge amount of interest. So explainable AI or explainability in machine learning really refers to the ability to understand how a machine learning model has arrived at a particular decision. And there's sort of two aspects to this. So one of those is, from a developer perspective, if you're building a machine learning model, you want to kind of debug it in some way. So you might want to know how a particular decision was being made by the model itself in order to improve the model. And that's sort of maybe the more traditional use of explainable machine learning. But what's come to the fore now is looking at the perspective of the end user or the person that those decisions from an AI are affecting, and to explain for the end user in a way that they can actually interpret and understand how a decision that's made that affects them is actually made by that model. And that's really come to the fore as well as AI models and algorithms, especially with complicated deep learning architectures, have become more and more complex. It's really hard, even for experts now, to actually say why a particular output of that model, what triggered or what initiated it. So it's a challenge, and these so-called black box models now are making all kinds of decisions that affect people's everyday lives in financial use cases and many different areas. So there's a real need for people to be able to understand and interpret why that decision is being made from this essential black box decision-making model. All right.
So I have a question. I thought, instead of letting people wait, and I know people get bored, like, oh, these guys are talking about their own nice story. I don't have time. I have to go. So perhaps, Ali Reza, there is a question Mike has asked, and let's jump into a question already, and I'll keep asking questions as well. So, Mike, I understand you understand that Brexit shouldn't stop other people to sort of work together. So I don't have an answer to that question, but I understand it was not a question, Mike. But this question is this what Oisin just explained, Ali Reza? Is it part of data and AI governance? And then the question is it good to cover the data first as a central structure?
Yeah, actually, it is. Let's call it ML governance. It covers different topics, including visibility, explainability, actually reproducibility, and interpretability. Actually, so these things are all of them are in ML governance, and the data, the outcomes, everything are included in this topic. So if you look at the human as the center of AI, which is the most important part, we need to take care of all these aspects. And the companies and all of them who are working in this field, they need to take care of these steps, all of them,
Understood. Anything you want to add, Oisin?
Inder, do you?
Yes, sir. I would like to add a bit to that, because when we talk about these topics, it's usually government is seen as the bad guy trying to control data and AI.
Yeah.
But there are other things to it also. For example, if I'm a company and I have a model, I want to. That's sort of my business secret also, right? And like PPML techniques sort of help you protect your model also, protect your data. So nobody can do like back inference attack and protect that. So it's not just governance, but also like on companies' part also there are initiatives, there are incentives, I should say, to do these kind of things. Yeah,
I think it's great point. Go ahead, Oisin. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, I see. The second part of that question is it good to cover data first as a central structure first. So, I mean, I think there's sort of all aspects need to be sort of addressed and covered. So there's of course the data as well, and in privacy preserving machine learning kind of sphere, there's the differential privacy and other techniques that are on the data set itself, and refer to the data set, I suppose, before the models are trained on that data set. But then it's also important to address the models themselves, and there's the privacy and I suppose security is another way of thinking about it of those models. So it's sort of across the board. I don't think there is any one point which you can sort of solve all the issues of this. It has to be looked at in a kind of holistic view of the data, the models that are trained on the data, the types of models and algorithms being used as well, and then right up to those decisions, how they are exported or output from the model, and what consumes or who consumes those as well.
Yeah, if I want to add one sentence, actually, people mostly think data is the most important part because they have heard mostly about GDPR, things like that. Even sometimes they're confused between the GDPR and the privacy things. But I would say, like Oisin mentioned, all the things in the chain are important. So the machine learning by itself, the models are really important. Explainability, like Oisin mentioned, is really important. So I won't say the data probably is the thing we need to look at mostly. No, everything is important. Yeah.
Perfect. There's so questions are coming. I think this new approach is really working. People are posting more questions. Who wants to take this question? I do definitely have have some ideas around the Web3, decentralized frameworks, and blockchain somehow is beginning to find adoption. Any one of you gentlemen, it's up to you guys. Guyana Dave, great question, I think, especially when the battle between the fundamentals of Web 2, the wave that led companies like Google and Amazon, and they were the distributors of information and services, and we were the subscribers, consumers. And then eventually we put our data up there on Instagram or on TikTok, whatever, or Google, and we get frustrated about, well, data is my data. Now this new Web3 sort of decentralized, sort of tokenized economy, how does this fit into from the perspective of AI?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting area actually about blockchain and its sort of relationship to AI. And we've actually been doing a lot of work on blockchain technology within CeADAR, and obviously relating that to AI, which is our sort of core focus. And I remember I gave a talk a couple of years ago about this area of blockchain
A couple of
in the
years
context
ago.
of AI. Yeah, well, it was just pre-pandemic. Time gets a bit hazy over the last couple of years with all these, new world we're living in. I think
2018 was a time when there was a lot of discussion happening around, Web3 and all that. Then it died down, and now it's again picking up.
Yeah, I think it was just sort of pre-pandemic a talk, and there was kind of a bit of accusations of buzzword bingo, mentioning blockchain and AI and bringing all these things just for the sake of it. But looking at, we've looked a lot at blockchain in the context of AI, and one of the big advantages in many real-world applications of using blockchain systems that can kind of support AI and data analysis applications is that a lot of problems with AI and deployment of AI is access to data, particularly if it's spread amongst different participants or different players who don't necessarily want to share their data or are comfortable sharing that. And that also, in privacy preserving machine learning, there's sort of federated learning fields that kind of deal with this as well. But in the context of blockchain, what blockchain can allow consortia of participants to do is to share their data in a really trusted, structured way where they still retain ownership of their data, but they can allow that data to be blended together in ways that then can support applications of AI and machine learning and general analytics of that data in a way where it's not siloed within these different organizations. So it allows sharing without a completely sort of open model at the same time.
Awesome. Any technical example you'd want to throw in there?
Well, I don't have very deep knowledge in blockchain, but while doing PPML, there have been few research papers where blockchain has also come into the picture, and it kind of can help preserving privacy in some cases. I'm not too knowledgeable about that, but I think Oshin might have.
Yeah. So in the CeADAR Center, we're working on a project which is looking at a blockchain solution for supply chain scenarios. So this is used quite a lot in sort of track and trace and traceability in supply chain. But we're particularly looking at this in the context of applying AI for demand forecasting. And it's particularly relevant now with supply chain disruptions that's happened during the pandemic. There's a real interest in being able to predict these as they sort of move further down the supply chain, sort of root causes that have a ripple on effect at the end, kind of consumer. And we're working with a couple of companies, Exertis, which is a supply chain solutions company, and Sona Lake, a software development partner, with a disruptive technology innovation fund funded project under the Irish government to actually develop these kind of approaches.
Wonderful. One of the things, so we're developing an architecture within our own research lab, where I was thinking in there, for example, the models that are developed, you could have smart contracts, and each time there is a model drift, you have a smart contract based on that. And then essentially you can build a timeline. So you not only, you own that, the model, and then it becomes easier for a software company, which I think you raised a very important point. The reason, a lot of people blame Silicon Valley companies, and I'm not there to attack or defend them. All I feel is if I was developing a complex piece of software, and sure enough, I scrape the data, if I'm Facebook, I have the data from people because they all signed the end user license agreement. They know what they're doing. But still, if that model I want to give back to the world, because Facebook does that all the time, right? With Facebook AI research team, and they develop models. And imagine if there was a way, if we could tie in smart contracts, which is part of that sort of fundamentals of blockchain, and then package these, then we would know that this is the model developed by Facebook. So the fear of losing your intellectual property because you built so much, you can protect it. But again, it's still evolving, so let's not try to hash it out right here. I have more questions coming up. So Mike, I hope your question was answered. Deghani, great question. And I think this is a great question as well. Perhaps Ali Reza, I know, again, these things sound so high level: governance, provenance, data provenance, ML governance. And could you handle this question? So I can read it out for you. I'm not sure, you're sitting far away from your screen. So it says, shall this be achieved if we have acceptable metrics defined? And then the question is, who defines them? And so far, it has been left to the implementer choices.
That's a very interesting question, actually. And so that's the, regulatory things usually is not the thing that, let's say, the specific organization are involved in. So I think all the players in the area and the space are responsible for that. Like Inder mentioned, actually, startups are playing really significant role in that. They are trying to deliver interesting solution and also find interesting areas to work on. From the other side, the governments and governmental organizations, they are working on this topic too. So I would say that's a mixture of things, and they are trying to find the solution that works the best for everyone. For example, in this week, we were working on some of the platform, Irish government platform that provides the data, public data for the people, everyone. So that's the matter of everyone needs to have access to the data, and there are some people who are pushing government to publish the data publicly. What is the regulation around that? How to preserve the privacy? What's the human-centered aspect of that? So all these things, they are the things that are deal. And yeah, just my answer is it's not specific. It's not like the implementer choice. No, I don't think so. Like I said, everyone is responsible for that. And as we go ahead, we will see more regular things to protect it.
Yeah, I think, it's kind of still very early days in a lot of the kind of consolidation of these ideas and where it's going. So, we're still very much in an area of flux. I mean, with the EU draft regulations on AI, that's just a draft regulation. And so there's a long time for it to be sort of, until things are going to get more concrete. So we're in this kind of flux phase at the moment. I don't think there's any specific answers to these.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a bit optimistic about it. I would say, because yes, the inputs from the research still have to go a long way, to become like a regulation. So, but there has been like significant progress, I would say, in this. And I'll give 2 examples here. GDPR, let's say. GDPR, we all know about anonymization. You remove personally identifiable information from a data set, and we say it's anonymized and privacy is protected. But even back in like 2007 and 2008, we have seen examples where people, find some other information from elsewhere and combined it with the anonymized data set to reveal the identities of the people. So Netflix's data set was one such example. Again, like back in 2007, 2008, where like thousands of users were identified from the anonymized data set.
I saw that research.
And like huge like lawsuits followed, and Netflix had to pay a lot to settle those outside court. But so that has actually been incorporated into GDPR. So GDPR differentiates between 2 terms called anonymization and pseudo-anonymization. So GDPR says if your data set is anonymized, but some other auxiliary information which can be added in the future is able to de-anonymize that data set, then that is not anonymization, that is pseudo-anonymization. And that is covered under GDPR. So that means you are responsible for if the data is de-anonymized. So GDPR, in that sense, has taken the inputs from research that has been there for like a decade almost now, and incorporated that into law. But again, like there are still some areas where more research, more metrics are needed. Again, like differential privacy is one. For example, in differential privacy, there's something called privacy budget. So which is a number which you can allocate. So in researchers, there is like an unset convention that the budget should be less than 1. right? Then the data will be protected. But Apple, on the other hand, has a budget of around 2024.
Oh, really?
And it means, yeah, so it has been like severely criticized. You can see a lot of articles about that you, for namesakes, Apple has implemented differential privacy, but it actually is not private at all because the budget is so large. So like, I think there are both kind of examples, but I would say it is going the right way. And as soon as we have more reliable metrics, they would be incorporated in these regulations.
Yeah. If I just add to that as well, I mean, I think as more people are becoming aware of these issues, and in terms of practitioners as well, so data scientists, people developing and designing machine learning models are aware of these concerns. And a plug for the human-centered AI masters here. This kind of knowledge, where more people are getting this understanding of the concerns and so on, and the current technical kind of solutions that have been developed so far to some of these. As more people are aware and understand that, I think that will really help kind of consolidate and bring together the ideas and really develop this in terms of more of a governance aspects as well, because it will feed up to that.
Wonderful. I mean, there are some fascinating questions coming in, so I'll have to make sure that I do a good job of being a moderator here. I think one question I would try to sort of shape the question, because Mike has asked like 1, 2, 3 questions in one, and really interesting. And I'll let you, Oshin and Inder and Ali Reza divide the task between the three of you. So model distribution, distributed training, distributed inferencing, I should say. Okay, I digress. So there is this general purpose explainability, and I kind of start cringing. I have some good friends, they start talking about frameworks. In the end, I've read 300 PowerPoint decks, and my head is sort of all, full of a lot of visuals. And then there is a algorithm, a model-centric explainability, all right? So I think, and then I'm just gonna sort of put the question. So I see these guys are also asking the similar question. George Sharko, I'll put your question as well on first. Let me throw Mike's question here. I know, Mike, you're eating into our time, but we allow that because the questions are great. So I'll say, Oshin, why don't you take a shot at this? I think this is your terrain. And try to be brief, because I have some more questions coming in, really interesting ones.
Yeah, so what are the key methods in explainable AI to getting transparency and preserving privacy? Yeah, so I mean, I suppose there's two key approaches, and they're quite different. So Tari, as you mentioned, there's the sort of model agnostic view of explainable AI, where the model is a black box and you literally have data going in and an output from the model coming out. And there's a range of techniques such as LIME, L-I-M-E, for example. Don't ask me to exactly remember what all those letters stand for. I'll probably get it wrong. Which is one of the kind of state-of-the-art techniques for this now. And essentially, you can think of those as these algorithms providing the model with loads of different examples, looking at the output from that model according to those examples and inferring how that model operates and makes its decision internally. And then those can be used to explain the operation of the model, knowing nothing about internally how that model works. So that could be applied to a deep learning trained network, or it could be applied to a decision tree. It doesn't need to know. The other field is the model or the algorithm specific. And if you can imagine a decision tree, for example, you could explain that specifically for a decision tree, just going down through that tree and building an explanation that, this value is lower than this, and then it was greater than this, and so on. So that would be only specific to a decision tree type model. So there's these two aspects. What we're seeing more and more is the interest, though, in these black box, opaque model explainable techniques, because more and more the advanced models are just going that way.
Yeah. Ali Reza, I know I have another question for you, PPML. So probably Ali Reza, so we are already kind of getting a feeling that, yes, we are not there yet. And it's a pity that the industry is taking so long a time to build standards. Just like NIST, for cloud computing, also it started the same way. There were a lot of things happening. There were no standards. So, there still aren't, to be honest with you. But somehow the big guys, the big three guys, eventually sort of converged based on the market market strategies, where they ended up converging to certain pricing ecosystem. But we still haven't solved that. But again, in AI, Ali Reza, what are the things that the students should be learning to really become competent beyond PowerPoints? So how do we do that? And how do we teach these in the Human AI Masters program?
If I get your question appropriately, I'm not sure if I get your question exactly.
Is it difficult, or is it hard to build such beautiful concepts which engineers and developers have been building for a long time into a curriculum for Human AI Masters? Would it be easier to put these together and say, these are the set of frameworks, and perhaps, hey, EU, take a look at it. Perhaps you could learn from this as well. Or do you think it's still difficult to put that into curriculum and teach younger people?
I don't want to categorize it as more difficult or easier, because that's the same challenge. I mean, the same challenges we have had already in developing the AI algorithms to, for example, if you back to like 10 years, 15 years ago, when LeCun actually introduced a new convolutional neural network, that was a challenge. How before that, they thought probably neural network is not a good solution. And because of that, so I remember from 30 years ago, it was started working on artificial neural network, but then 10 years, 15 years ago, again, we came back to artificial neural network and deep learning happened, etc. So I don't want to say it is more difficult. To me, that's the same all the time. Challenges are ahead. Probably the challenges, the little bit difficulty of these things, human-centered things in AI, probably would be the challenges in terms of the regulations, because if you want to develop the algorithm and systems to perform something better, that's something. And then if you want to preserve the privacy of the people, the things, that's another thing. So it's really important. Probably that's the more challenging aspect of human-centered AI than the normal general AI. But in general, it is valid to say all the time we are facing the challenges, and I would see that as a valid challenge in this field, not something strange.
I'd like to add a bit to it. I mean,
sure.
In terms of teaching explainable AI, as a data scientist, I see an additional benefit. Right now, how we work is like, we train a lot of models. The ones we find good, we then fine tune them, etc. But many times, I reach a point where I have hit a like a bottle, like a roadblock. Sorry. Which doesn't allow me to improve accuracy any further, and that's where explainable AI sort of helps me understand which parameter is the one causing the problem. So is there anything I can improve in the model? So way also, it's important for us data scientists to improve their models
totally
to see how
totally. I think introspection, root cause analysis is something, a daily job for all of us. Oshin, this question on regulation. I know Ali Reza just was, sort of ending his note on regulation. So can you take this question from Mike? And then I have the question. Next question is for you, Inder. Again, it's a nice question as well.
Yeah, so I see part of this question, as legislation is coming, do you think explainable AI will become a standard? So, I mean, we can see that already in some financial regulations. So a lot of models, for example, that are making financial decisions around credit scoring and so on, that all the major players, they're using those right now. There's already financial regulations that those decisions must be explained. Now, that legislation wasn't sort of focused on AI models in particular. I mean, it's a general regulation to make sure even traditional methods of credit scoring and so on would be then open and explained to the end user or the regulatory body if need be. But these equally apply to machine learning credit risk models, for example. So it is there to a certain extent, and the explainable machine learning techniques then are used to fulfill that requirement of that legislation.
Yeah, and if I want to add one sentence, actually the other example is the autonomous driving, because really AI is really important. If you are in the crossroad and something happens, a bus coming from the other side, pedestrian walking, what is the best decision to make? So that's really, it should be something, and maybe that's the reason why it is delayed to see autonomous car in the streets, because in terms of technology, it is mature enough to be there. To be honest, you probably have seen a lot of video in social media people are sharing, but why it's not in the street? Because of the explainability AI, and hopefully it needs to be in the standard.
Well, medical imaging too. I think few weeks back.
That's another example. Yeah.
Few weeks back, we had a talk from which IBM was it? Or some company and they were working medical sort of ML models, and they came back to us and said that the health services actually want explainability, so that there's no misdiagnostics, there's no wrong diagnostics. So that's another good example of where standards are coming in.
Yeah, and a huge amount, I think, a driver for this is trust as well. So it's allowing people and organizations to trust AI and machine learning systems, because it's saying, oh, we have this great solution here. How does it work? How does it make decisions? Oh, we don't know, but we can tell you it's 90% accurate. That's not good enough in a lot of real world applications. And as Inder says, particularly if that's making a medical diagnosis from you, doctors are held accountable. Machine learning models making diagnoses need to be held accountable too. And through the explainable aspects of that, that's a way of addressing accountability.
Yeah, plus, talking about the medical cases, the privacy preserving machine learning also is really, really equally maybe important in the medical cases, because it's really important to protect the people's data and so on. I don't want to go long, but I want to just mention.
Yeah. So ICC, some of our audience are being extremely, they're finding it super beneficial. And I see we're reaching 45 minutes, but there is one question which I've starred. So I didn't know in this tool I had a starring capability. So Mike, super excited, and I think it's great. Do please ask more questions, because it is a problem that is exists across industries, various like healthcare domain. Today we don't care about manufacturing. At least I'm not saying we don't care, but people think it's about manufacturing equipment, etc. There might be a lot of interesting things which you do not want competitors in other parts of the world to understand. Simple processes like, each company has built its, they've created moats around how to do simple processes, like even dyeing, putting dyes into the cast iron when you're building some part you have to deliver to Tesla. Now, the problem with machine or deep learning, when I say problem, is not that it's solving their supply chain and the process of they've been sped up by probably a scale of 100 or probably more. But imagine if that know-how, that intellectual property, which you plug into some other ecosystem, can be reverse engineered. You're kind of quite exposed in terms of the technique that you spent, a few decades building and understanding. Same applies to ASML, the chip manufacturer, right now the darling, all the European ministers, no offense, EU commissioners, they're sitting and coming to the north, south of Holland. But we always say, the more we use machine learning, the better we need to be careful in terms of preserving that. So coming to that, I'm going to add another question, which I have starred. Excuse me. George has asked some really interesting questions. How about you guys break it up into amongst the three of you, starting with Inder, perhaps? I know, regulation is something we cannot answer that question, but perhaps, your take on it, and then see if gentlemen, Ali Reza and Oshin, if you can also throw in your opinion on that.
Sure. I'll just read out the question first. Like PPML and XAI directly meet the expected EU regulation, but it is foreseen also as certification, similar to cybersecurity certification schemes. How can we test and certify the PPML, for example?
For instance,
So I think I'll begin with the last part of this question about PPML, how we can test and certify. So as PPML is like an umbrella term, so there are many different ways. So I'll give you two examples. And these are two actual there are two companies who are working on this, and they have been working very closely with us on this project, on the PPML project. So one is Oblivious.ai, and the approach they follow is they have these protected enclosures. So which is like a system in the cloud where no information goes out. So it's like, it's like all the privacy is caged, and they provide those certificates for that. That's one example of certification that a company provides, like guarantees that no information that you're sending out, sending to this secure enclave, as they call it, will go out. So that's one approach. Another approach actually is another company working with us called Infer, and they use something called secure multi-party computation, which is basically that the data never leaves your premises. So let's say if I'm a hospital and I have like 100 cases of a certain disease, and there is some machine learning engineer who wants to train a model, we wouldn't send them the data. Their model would come to us, we'll train it on our data, and we'll send back the model. And that too also in a way that their model is also protected and our data is also protected. So neither can we trace their models, and neither can they backtrace their data from it. And that system will sit across multiple hospitals. So if there are only a few cases of, let's say, a disease in this hospital, but there will be hundreds when combined across many different hospitals. So, and these sort of certify these sort of tests, depending on what kind of PPML technique you are dealing with, they are there. Differential privacy, again, I was mentioning there is a privacy budget, so that can also be set into regulation that the privacy budget should increase certain. That's very quantifiable. Yeah, I think so. Depending on the technique, yes, we can test and certify privacy in data sets with some modern techniques.
Very good, perfect. I love these use cases.
I maybe just add to that as well. So, I mean, we've discussed already so far examples of anonymization and pseudo-anonymization. So some of these for like that might be a little bit fuzzy in terms of can we guarantee privacy, for example, in certain cases. But a lot of the techniques in privacy-preserving machine learning, like secure multi-party computation and differential privacy, these are developed by researchers and come with mathematical guarantees of privacy. So that's a very different thing with having a kind of a best effort preserving of privacy, which a lot of anonymization techniques are, but then more complex and sophisticated de-anonymization approaches come along and render them, render them useless. However, with sort of the more mathematically guaranteed forms of privacy, they are, unless there's some amazing innovation, maybe in quantum computing in 20 years that can reverse some of those, but these are much more provable and guaranteeable. And I think they can then form the part of certifications because they can be really guaranteed and mandated.
Yeah, I think, definitely. I think QML is not a few decades. I think in this decade, we probably might face a lot of challenges in terms of security, all the hashing algorithms that have protected us apparently from threats. They will be unhashed quite fast. But
global banks might work so well in that world. Yeah.
Ali Reza, what is there something you want to add in terms of the regulatory sort of measurements and helping? They are. I mean, I'm not sure how popular PPML is within the EU Commission. I'm sure there are smart people sitting there, and I hope they should talk to more research firms and labs like yourselves. And but I think XAI is kind of really, they've written lots of documents that are on the European Commission. What do you think about this question?
Yeah, because of the time, I don't want to go too much.
No, I understand.
Just like what Inder and Oshin mentioned, it is going on. The things in this field and privacy-preserving machine learning is really hot topic. I want to tie it to something interesting, which is the research and job activities in the field in terms of the PPML.
Yeah, perhaps explain from the perspective, because I can imagine, the students are like, oh my God, it looks like a kind of a very super scary master's. But I think we want to make it sort of people should be able to embrace it without getting scared that they're learning difficult techniques, right?
Yeah, actually, just I wanted to mention that that topic because that's really interesting and important thing to mention, and we are in the short of time now. So just I wanted to say it's really getting popular in the big companies. You can see all kind of the jobs from the internship. In specifically, they mention privacy preserving machine learning. So imagine maybe a few years ago, no one thought probably it is a job title, but now you can see that from the internship to PhD position to postdoc even to jobs and so on. I have seen in different companies like Facebook, Meta, let's say, you can see this kind of jobs and so on. So it is really interesting in terms of the things that a student need to know in this field. Okay, that's AI and machine learning. They need to have a good mathematical base as the normal AI if they want to study, and also the data science, but also they need to be interested, let's say interested, instead of being sophisticated. They need to be interested in topics like cryptography, in topics like blockchain, in topics like federated learning, things like that. If they are not interested in this field, so maybe it's better to follow the other areas in the AI and machine learning if they are interested, and if they are in a background or something like that. So I really recommend following this path and get really specialized in this field.
Perfect. I think I really enjoyed personally this conversation. There were a couple of these examples and use cases that you mentioned, and they were perfect, because they literally show that it's not a theoretical discussion between researchers. It's something happening. Oshin, I know you've been also working on XAI for quite a while. I really enjoyed also the fact that that you guys are keeping an eye on Web3 and NFTs and tokenization, RPC protocol, stuff like that, and smart contracting. I think those are important, interesting things. We are also trying to understand or learn these to how to put these, not just based on a server sort of or an N-tier architecture, how the web has been built today, but the decentralized architecture where we can have and sort of, in any case, have control. For example, the model, if someone ships a model, someone else provides data, and then having these sort of demarcation lines within not just security, but also privacy zones. That's awesome. Ali Reza, I think you gave some very good examples of no matter how difficult it seems, whether regulatory authorities or people coming on the industry, it's already happening. So I really want to thank all of you very much for this wonderful conversation. We spent 55 minutes talking about it. It was fascinating. Any last words you have in terms of, I know CeADAR, we're beginning to get to know this organization also. It's very exciting to see with the work that you're doing. Any one last sort of big sort of message you want to give to the students? Because eventually we're doing this webinar to get more people involved. I'd love to hire these smart, researchers, security, privacy researchers in our own lab. So would you want to, so is there something you guys want to say? One final message to the learners, why it's important?
If I want to add something, we really enjoyed, let's say myself, I really enjoyed of this conversation. Thanks, Terry, for inviting us to that. But according to the question I have seen in the talk, I would say there is a community in CeADAR, which is community.cedar.ie. I invite everybody who is interested to join our community. You can get involved in all of these type of questions, daily based, several questions every day, different topics on there. So that would be a good opportunity. And also in CeADAR, CeADAR is open for all the students, particularly in this program, the HCAIM program, if they want to spend their time in here in CeADAR and doing something.
Yeah, and finally, I think for the students as well, that I think the sort of human-centered understanding of ethics, privacy, and so on, it's not going to be an optional extra for practitioners in the field. This is a fundamental skill and understanding that at least you need to have an awareness of and an understanding of what the implications of that. So I think it's a critical skill and asset for machine learning and AI practitioners for the future. And the human-centered AI Masters program, I think, is a really innovative way of learning that and getting those skills.
I couldn't have ended it any better than Oshin, Ali Reza, and Inder. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be ending the broadcast. If the three of you could just hang on for a few seconds, we can wrap this up. But audience, I mean, we really love you. I think you guys have been following us for quite a while. Our job is to help you guys sort of get into great, research programs, and this master's program is a great way to get in touch with us. Figure out what we are building. CeADAR, definitely whatever that they can share, they're allowed to share within the consortium project. We'll pull you into amazing hackathons and projects related to not just building technical solutions, but introspecting these through the lens of a regulator, as a regulator yourself. That gives you the power and control on the system, being and building trustworthy AI systems. Wonderful to be part of this. And I think our master's program, like I said, just to wrap it up, is we're building this curriculum right now. We're extremely excited across all the project partners. And we know that I was talking to one of our project partners in Ireland yesterday. We are already being noticed within the European Commission. It seems to be like we could be the beacon or potentially the true north if we do well. But getting you students and working with you guys in an interactive fashion will be a great way. We'd love to meet you, hopefully onboarding you, some of you folks, into our program. Thanks, everybody, and talk to you guys soon. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.